So good evening, everyone. We were just simply saying that we hoped that everybody was doing okay today after the difficulties of the debate and the politics that we have been under, and that we can come through this. We can do it. We can all do it, people. So hang in there. Hang in there. So we are studying A Blueprint of Enlightenment by Gien, Inoue, Roshi. And we have come to the first section, which begins on page 59, and it goes to page 70. And you might have noticed right away that if you are reading the translation of the Gakudō Yōjinshū, there are no footnotes given when we come to the chapter sections. So if you want the footnotes, you have to go back in and read it. That starts on page 37, where you will find the footnotes. So just so you are aware of that, you may have been wondering what some of these meanings are, like the Kalavinka bird or Kimnara, who the god Kimnara is. Those things are given footnotes in the first section that begins on page 37. So on page 59 then, we have the Dōgen Zenji's language, and we have his teaching on the Gakudō Yōjinshū. And then we go into the commentary on page 61. So you can feel the shift in texture when we come from Dōgen Zenji to come to Gien Roshi's voice as it begins on page 61. And we can feel a sense of relaxation and a familiarity, a familiar tone as he's just speaking. As I pointed out, this text was spoken and then it was transcribed and put into this book form. So he says, let's focus only on the key points in this chapter. And it says, the most important thing is to have the desire to realize the way with all your heart. It is no use practicing the way if you don't have this motivation. Without this desire to realize the way, nothing will happen. So all of there are those words that we talk about, desire. Do we have desire in practice? And motivation and a point, and he's pointing to something. He's saying that there is something that we're going to look to actually do here, and we must do it with all our heart. We must have the desire to realize the way with all your heart. So right from the get-go, in his very first short paragraph, he's telling us that we have to throw ourselves entirely into practice and place all of our heart and desire to know ourselves, to find out who this person, who this is that has manifested in this body that each one of us has. So, and here then in the second paragraph, he uses another word, attain. This word attain that we also say, oh, there's nothing to attain. But he says the Bodhi mind wants to attain unsurpassed, complete, and perfect enlightenment. So this seed that is deep down in us has this desire to find itself, to address itself, to face itself, to know itself entirely. And so here we have all those words that we say, oh no, we shouldn't have those. Desire and attain and motivation. So the mind that seeks the way is the Bodhi mind, he tells us. So seeks the way. Once again, here's another word, seeking. Mm-hmm. So almost everything in here are words that we have all discussed and thought, well, that's not what we do. We don't seek, we don't do any of these things, we don't desire, we don't attain at all. So here he is using this language.
Ada-san?
Yes.
Is the Bodhi mind in this context the relative mind that is seeking?
You know, I think that the relative mind is seeking, but I think he's talking about the Bodhi mind. And the Bodhi mind is the bodhicitta.
Uh-huh.
That deep inner sense that is very quietly moving us in our lives. That very, very, very quiet, intuitive inner voice that leads us to manifest the Dharma, that leads us to sit zazen, that leads us to come to sit zazen.
That's part of the seeking, then.
Yes.
In the seeking, this occurs.
Yes, it does. That's right. It is that mind that seeks the way. So the bodhicitta is this very deep inner seed that was sitting in us that made us one day say, I need to find a place. I need to find some place that I can face myself. I need to know a practice that is going to be able to lead me to try and understand this inner yearning that wants to know itself, that wants to find its way, which is different from saying, I want to be a dancer, or I want to be a great pianist, or something like that. This is different. This is a deep inner soul, place of soul that hungers for communion with itself, to face itself and to know itself completely. So so I can't say that it's the relative world. It's, of course, we function in the relative world. And so it also manifests in us in the relative world. But I can't say that the Bodhi mind is in the relative world. I don't see it that way.
Okay.
Ida-san?
Yes.
What other sort of mind is there other than the Bodhi mind?
Well, actually, none. All that we are is the Bodhi mind. So there's not some other mind out there. It's that, well, most of us, it is not realized, so that we don't see it in its totality and its completion in us. And so this whole book is about how to realize that. And this is what Gien Roshi is going to lead us toward, and Dōgen Zenji in the blueprint. This is the blueprint. These are the steps that we can take and the way that we can go to come to that realization that we are the totality of the Bodhi mind.
Thank you.
And of course, the Bodhi mind exists just fine in the relative. It isn't that we don't interact in the relative. Of course we do. And so the question of the life is, how do we mediate the relative and the absolute, and how do we make them so that they are completely balanced in our life experience, so that we become the relative in the absolute and the absolute in the relative, and that we become the syncretic nature, so that we function in all places and in all things. And we aren't afraid to enter whatever we find in the relative world, because we are at home within the Bodhi mind. So, so he's telling us also that the way we are right now is it. It's not some exotic place. It's not some extraordinary kind of thing. It's how we are right now. And the thing that still is that, how do we ask the right questions of ourselves? How do we ask, what's my essential nature? And how do we address that in our lives so that we are able to focus and to attend to these deep questions such that we come to some deep probing that allows that to be revealed to us. So this takes some work. And he says, what is my essential nature? What is the true nature of my mind? And he has already told us that this is going to take all my heart to find this out. I am going to have to focus so deeply to be able to answer this because I am so hungry for it. And so, what is this? What is the self? We need to have the desire to be a person who can answer those questions and who can say, this is what a human being is. I think we've had some, I recall an exercise that we did here at Olympia Zen Center on a Wednesday night. And we asked one another, what does it mean to be human? And it's a really difficult question. What does it mean to be human? I encourage you to take this up into a journal. It's a profound question, and I think it does encompass all of the natural inclinations of the relative world, that is the best of the relative world, and at the same time, the hope that we would each realize the best in ourselves. This is what a human being is. You should have this desire because in general, no one knows what a human being is or who they really are. So after we do all of that, he says we don't know. Most of us do not know. Few people have actually answered these questions. Few people have reached to the stage that Gien Roshi has reached to be a Buddha. And so we don't answer this question easily. Like, what is the self? Well, for those maybe who have been asking that or have spent many, many, many years asking or trying for that question, we only come to emptiness. There is no answer that we can ever give to what is the self. But we still have to answer that question. And so to be able to answer that question, we need the experience of emptiness. We need to be able to stand in such a way that we are confident in the experience of it. So this is what a human being is. And a human being's hope is to be the best, to arrive at the greatest inner knowledge, the greatest inner experience of the true self is the purpose of life. It's our very great purpose.
Edo-san?
Mm-hmm.
So this idea of the desire to realize the way with all your heart, you see that description or metaphor in a lot of religious teachings and in that context of desire. Is there more to it than just a metaphor? Is there a deeper meaning to with all your heart?
I don't think so. I think it is very much about a combination of commitment to oneself, of the need to truly love all of humanity, the need to understand what compassion is, and the need to be able to have the experience to be able to be larger than one's small self. And this takes a huge commitment of the heart and focus, because one wants that fulfillment of its nature, of its kind. Fulfillment is that is, very close to grasping too, but I think that is there, and I think it's a legitimate word to say that we fulfill our lives by understanding the true self, or by coming to the experience of the true self. And I don't think that to put your whole heart into that is not a cliche at all.
Thank you.
So this is very difficult for us. I mean, this is a very hard enterprise that we are engaging in, because I know I live with myself. I live with my own mind. I live with the ramblings that go on every day, and the things that I pay attention to, and how I waste time, or I am frivolous, or I am, thoughtless in some of the things that I attribute to the politicians. And so it goes on and on and on. And so we all live with ourselves. We know the truth about ourselves. We know in that sense, this relative person who lives, and we say, it's me, this is me. And we point to ourselves and we say, this is me after all. So what could the true self be if I know me, and how I am each day, and what goes through my head? I think for everybody, myriad universes go through their minds every day. I mean, we couldn't possibly track all of the thoughts that go through any one human being in any day. It is just an extraordinary thing to realize the capacity of the mind to encompass, billions of worlds. So, but at the same time, this is, I am my own problem. We each are our own problems. So, at the same time, Gien Roshi tells us that this way, the way of Buddhism, the way of the Dharma, is the way of grasping with certainty what the true self is. And so we are already on the path, and so we can feel secure in that sense that we know this path. And if we can truly trust it and have faith in the promise of it, the Buddha promised that if we continue to practice, we will all awaken. Dōgen Zenji makes the same promise. All teachers in antiquity have made this promise to us. And so if we are true to trust and have faith in this, then it will come to us. That realization will happen. So the way of Buddha, at the very bottom of that page, he says, the way of Buddha is to truly seek what is real. So we are very fortunate to be able to engage in this study. I mean, how lucky is that to have stumbled upon this path? So I've turned over the page to page 62, and you know that you can interrupt at any time. Please, if you have any questions, I interrupt any time with your questions. So he also references Nagyaharajuna Bodhisattva. And here, but what is important here is how you can really feel the need to seek the way. The heart of the matter, which could help you become aware of that need, is that this body is impermanent. And nobody knows when we will die. It could happen at any time. I think we spoke about that last night when we were talking about Ryokan-san and the illness that overcame him, or that is the nature of his poetry was to talk about impermanence. It was the major theme in his poetry. And so we are impermanent. We're not guaranteed a long life, any of us. We're not guaranteed tomorrow. And so we don't know. And so if we are a little foolhardy, we may wait too long. And then he talks about older people coming to him and saying, you know, I got to be this age and I haven't done that yet. And I need to do that before I die. And so he works with older people then who are trying their best to feel that they can leave this life fulfilled and completed. Because there is a sense of completion, not that one stops living or stops doing and working in whatever capacity they work. There is a sense of completion that one has seen, emptiness, and then is able to serve life in a different way, or is able to be at peace with oneself and the world around one. But here, so he's got, it may be too late, but in this life I want to elucidate what the self is and what happens after death. People want to do that. And those are the kinds of things that if we are practitioners, we are working also on, you know, what is your notion of death? And what do you think happens? You know, that's something you must work out for yourself. Buddhism does not supply an answer of the afterlife. And so you need to ask, what is my own view of death and what happens in death? And very likely it's what happens in life. There's just life after life after life. But Buddha did not teach reincarnation. So we can't go to that for a particular answer, but each one must work that out. And the next 4 weeks on a Tuesday night, we are going to be talking about dialogical journaling. And things that I am bringing up right now are things that are excellent questions for dialogical journaling. And at this particular time in our distress in our country, dialogical journaling is one of the healthiest mental things that you could do for yourself. So Tuesday nights, 7 o'clock for 1 hour. I always get you home after 1 hour. We're going to talk about dialogical journaling, which gives you the spiritual capacity to renew yourself and strengthen yourself in a way to examine it, in a way to explore and examine these kinds of questions. So this is the work that we do on the cushion. This is the work that Zen practitioners do. What is my life? What is my death? Why am I here? What is the self? You know, all of the existential questions are relevant for us in in Zen practice. So Gien Roshi is also then he's like a coach. He's like a soul coach, and he says, I'd like you to aspire to this clearly aspire to awaken. But he also says that once we begin on that kind of aspiration, we give up the sense of me, that it's no longer about me at all. It's about something larger. No concern about fame or profit. No concern about whether I'm going to survive in this life or even what I'm going to do. We're all going to do something, but for the time, it may not be our main question, but the me steps aside in the exploration of the true mind. So, this famous hair on fire, sit on the cushion like your hair is on fire. And so he has this, Dōgen Zenji has used this metaphor of attempting to save your head from being enveloped in flames. And so we sit then with the focus on coming to that realization, which saves our hair from catching fire because the body is on fire with the intention to sit. So he talked then about his own teacher, Toyin Ida. In 1886, there was an outbreak of cholera in Japan. Japan went through many great difficulties, many epidemics that really toppled the country in the 1800s. It was very, very difficult times. And then the cholera outbreak in 1886. So his teacher was a doctor, had graduated from medical school, and he saw all these people dying. And he needed to come to terms with his own self and his own understanding of the Dharma before he could go forward. So he quit and he studied and got ordained, and then finally went back to practice medicine. But because the need for him to study this deep question was so urgent, he stepped out of that realm and then finally went back to it after he had succeeded in his experience of emptiness. Granted, very few of us have this luxury. We've all got lives, we've got to pay rent, we have families to take care of. We just can't walk away from those things. And so I think this is not a simple answer for us about hair on fire and sitting with all your heart and giving up your job to go and live in the monastery for 2 years. This is not something that, if I look around at all of us, this is not something that just about anybody could do. And I have done it, but I don't think I could do it now, not at my age. And so, it's got a conflict in it for us who have families and who are living, with the need to support people around us. So I come to that with that understanding, and I would say that Gien Roshi does also. And so the problem is, how do we find the way within the life that we have? How do we give our heart to this with the life that we have? Because, we had children, or we have people to support, or we have to take care of an elderly mother, or there are all kinds of things. And so how do we do that and attend to daily life? So I think it's not an easy question, and I hope that we will enter Gien Roshi's entreaty in a way that we don't turn from, but that we try and work it out in our own lives. I think that's really, really important, that we not turn from the urgency, but then say, but how do I work that into my life as it is? So, because it's easy to feel second class, or easy to feel a bit of a slouch if we, don't rush to the cushion every single morning, or we aren't, holding a blueprint of enlightenment in our pocket every single day. So I say take it seriously, and yet hold it lightly. The Dharma should always be held lightly, seriously, yet lightly, in a way that that if you were to not notice it, it would fall out of your hand. So actually, so something that is so light in your palm could easily be overturned. So we hold it lightly in that way, with all the seriousness of it. And so, but do not be deterred, is what I say. Do not be discouraged by that entreaty that he gives.
Son, I'm curious, is this a call in one's life? You hear about people feeling called to a way. Is that what he's talking about? We all would like to have our path in life. And just like you said, there's the responsibilities that we're also involved in. So how to balance it, I guess, is what we're talking about. But it's a call, right? It's more than just a desire, right?
It's a big nudge. It certainly is that. I think we refer to that many times in the Christian idiom as being called to something. But I think that there is a deep response that comes that we must answer to when we see something that is true, that feels true to us. That is, if we sit zazen just even once, we feel there was something urgent there. There was something happened that seemed to be true. And we're not exactly sure what it is. And yet we feel that we have to follow that. We must follow it because this nudge keeps happening. And this is the bodhicitta, the seed of bodhicitta in us then, that is pulling us. And, it's like a carrot ahead of us. Like, I need to know that. I think I need to sit again to find out what that was. So we simply follow that in the growth of bodhicitta as it expands and enlarges as we continue to sit. And if we draw closer to the Dharma and we commit to practice, we discover that our life works its way so that we are able to, successfully follow it. It's a kind of magic that happens when we say, okay, I think this is my path. I think I will take this path. And so we discover that all of a sudden, maybe we see that there's a place to live closer to the Zendo, or we discover that there's another job opening that we get that allows us to come to the Zendo in the morning, or allows us to sit in the morning, or that allows us to study closer with Sangha. So all of these things shape out, and it's a kind of magic that occurs. And I'm sure that some of you can attest to that. I know that happened in my life.
So there's a pandemic, and all of a sudden you can participate remotely in the Sangha activities.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
That was the silver lining for me. I mean, that's for a long time I've wanted to participate with this Sangha, but it's 90-minute drive for me. And the pandemic kind of has a silver lining in that respect.
Yeah.
We can do a lot of things remotely now.
Well, we are going to continue this because we have people coming from Europe and, sitting Zazen with us from Europe and various places. So we will continue on Zoom. So there is that piece that happened. It's pretty interesting the way it unfolds. And I know that Karen has been to a practice period with 1,000 people. 1,000, Karen?
Yeah, just under 1,000. The matriarchs practice period had some time. They did their Zoom account for 1,000 people, and there were times when there were 400, 500 people in a session together.
Yeah, and Allison and I just came from a Zen conference, and there were about 150 people at the conference, and the people who attended were typically people who had never been able to go. One guy from Japan was never able to go because he never had the money to travel. Mm. And so he was able to be there. Many, many people were able to be there because we have this new electronic wonder. So.
Yeah. Thank you, Ada-san.
Yeah, so things conspire in our lives to move us in ways that become helpful. And the Dharma, so the manifestation then of something better in your life, a job that allows you to participate or something like that, very typically occurs when we commit to something. And it is that commitment. And I think that happens not only in the Dharma, but in something, if we say, I really, really want to go to graduate school, and I determine that, okay, I'm going to go to graduate school, well, something happens that, brings the ability for me to be able to do that. Brad, one of our members, he teaches on Wednesday night. Well, there's something that wasn't so good, but Brad had lost his job. He's a musician. And there were nothing happening, no performances, so he was broke. So he sat down and he said, okay, I'll fill out a UPS delivery application. And while he was doing that, the phone rang and he was offered a teaching job at a private music school. So, the universe gives to us. The universe provides, and the ability to trust in it is something that also goes along with practice, to trust in the Dharma. That is our deep place of trust. So.
Son, you talk about you gave a lot of examples of how we have to practice with what we have in our life, and I've been doing the instructions to the cook Dōgen fascicle with other people, and this idea that we just take what we have and we create something with it, and engage the Buddha Dharma in that respect. no matter whether we're meeting some sort of standard that we think exists. We can always try to tap into the true heart of what it is that we can do with our life, with what we have right in front of us.
Very wise, indeed. Great, great wisdom. I mean, that's exactly it. It isn't that, you know, when Dōgen Zenji says you don't have to go to a foreign country in order to practice or discover the Dharma. And that also means that we don't have to go very far from home in order to practice the Dharma. And I mean right in your house. I don't mean away from the United States. We don't have to leave home, actually, in order to practice the Dharma. And we don't have to worry whether what we are doing is correct or not. The Dharma is our great teacher. The Buddha is our main teacher. And so we really can't go wrong in that sense if we are earnest in wanting to open the spiritual gateways of the soul in us. So now I'm at the bottom of page 62. And so here's, you know, what is my true nature? What is the self? These are things you can grasp with certainty. It is your own matter, so you are the one who can know this best. So at the same time that we do work with a teacher, because, you know, the issue of teacher is going to come very strongly in one of these chapters. The Dharma is our best teacher. The Buddha is our best teacher. And at the same time, a living teacher is somebody that we are best to be able to face so that we don't fool ourselves, so that we don't lie to ourselves. And as Kobun Roshi always said, it's important for at least one person to know us entirely. We have to be known by somebody. And that person knows us so well that we cannot, we can't be deluded in that facing the teacher relationship. So at the same time that it's our own work, we still have to face somebody right on this level. And I know that at one point when I was, working with Kobun Roshi, Jerry's teacher, I was working with Kobun Roshi, and I was being very obstinate about something, I don't know what. And I guess I quoted some Dōgen or something to him. And he said to me, "Oh, you love dead teachers, don't you? They can't speak back to you." Really, really important thing. I mean, we all love the dead teachers because there's such wisdom there. But at the same time, we have to be known by somebody. Somebody has to know us so that we can't trick ourselves. They will not allow us to trick ourselves. It's an important point in that. But it is our own matter. So you are the one who can know this best. That's right at the top of 63. So when you understand, you will become aware that you understand the way. So maybe that goes to Gilda's question about this calling. But when we recognize the way, we know it, and we follow it. We're on it, and we're okay with it, however difficult it might be, or whatever personal turmoil we discover within it. If we are going through something like that, it's kind of great because we know that we are doing our work. It's not easy. None of this work is easy, and yet we are hungry for it at the same time. So once again, at the end of that paragraph, he says that the doctor was firm in his resolve to do what he did. I mean, we can't judge that. We can't judge, well, gosh, he was a doctor, yet he walked away from an epidemic. And that's not a question that we can ask. It was so important to him, and his resolve was so great that he had to do that. And so it's the most important question in our lives. So he did that and ultimately went back to medicine. So he says that if we are going to do this, it's necessary to be diligent like Shakyamuni Buddha when he raised his foot. So you know the story. Did you look at the footnote to see raising the foot? So that's where Shakyamuni Buddha came upon another teacher, and in great deference to this teacher, he stood on one foot for a week or something like that, in great honor and deference to that teacher. And so, but he was stalwart in his determination, and it would take incredible determination to stand on one foot for a week. So we, we practice repaying our debt of gratitude. Very possibly, gratitude is ultimately at the base of the unfolding of this practice. And that until gratitude truly manifests, we might be not quite, we might be still standing at the gate. And it's gratitude that finally pulls us through the standing at the gateway. To be standing right at the gate is a deeply spiritual place, a holy place. And so it is very likely gratitude for everything that we have received, for this life, for this food, for the appearance, for being shown the way, for the Buddha in our midst. And that incredible gratitude just sweeps over us, and we enter the totality of the awareness. So, so the single-minded practice then, this is, to stand, I guess he stood on tiptoes. I had him standing on one foot, but in any event, he raised his foot. But standing on tiptoes, this takes some great effort, some single-minded way to not worry about the outcome, about fame or profit, or, he says, beautiful women, or handsome men, if we're going to be equal, right? This was all spoken prior to the feminist movement, by the way. But Gien Roshi's words remain. Nobody tried to change the language, but we can here. So handsome men or beautiful women, to put that completely aside. So, meaning that when we come into practice, we don't come into the Sangha for social reasons. We don't come to find a boyfriend or to find a girlfriend. We come into it because of the single purpose of what practice is going to show us. And if we practice like that, then naturally it will unfold. We will realize the way. A path will appear. Paths always appear. There are myriad pathways that all come to one path. So, so it's Dōgen Zenji's language then. Anytime it's italics in the script, that's referring back to Dōgen Zenji's text. You will naturally become one with the true Bodhi mind. If you really value this matter, then certainly it will be brought to a conclusion. So then he says, he's talking about the origin of the universe, and nobody knows what that is. He says no human really knows what that origin is, and I'm sure all of you, I went straight to Big Bang, I went straight to physics and the great futurists and so forth and so on. And, I feel old, but there's the Big Bang. So sure, we know the origins. But we really don't. We really, really don't. And so we come to this not knowing exactly how humankind got here. We can look at, we can look at the fossil record and we can look at all that, but we really, it's an extraordinary mystery. I mean, consciousness, we don't know what consciousness is. We haven't figured that out yet. We can't explain it. And so we come to this just not knowing how we got here and what it is to be human. And nothing, he says, our life is guaranteed without knowing anything about how or why. So here we are, we propagate children, we see our grandchildren grow, and we expect that life will go on like this, and we really don't know how or why. We don't totally understand biology, we don't understand how matter comes into being entirely. So at the same time then, problems arise. And when we, include the body and we begin to grow and we start to, as, how young does it start that a little kid says, that's mine? 2? Is it age 2 or something? I'm looking at Allison because her grandchild was visiting yesterday and it's this most darling creature. Oh my goodness. And so now she's about coming into where she's
18 months and she's already with mine.
That's mine.
Pretty
That's
close.
mine.
Pretty close.
Yeah, close to it. Yeah, at about age 2. You can't have that. It's mine. That belongs to me. So this development occurs, and I don't know that we can bypass that. Unless maybe somebody is born a saint, a child is born a saint, who might bypass that. But the development of the ego is something that we move through. The ego as a young child, as a young person, is it protects us from doing anything too stupid. So it's a necessary passage, a rite of passage, as it were. And but these problems develop in the human relationships very, very early in life. So where am I? So still this question that Siddhartha had, what is the self and who am I? So Shakyamuni Buddha himself had this question, what is the self? What is the nature of suffering? Who am I? How can we find real satisfaction in life? How is it possible to resolve the problem of birth and death? How can we stop suffering with all the problems that we have? This is big stuff. I mean, this is huge. These are the problems of the Buddha. These are the same problems that the Buddha had. And then he offers us a way to be able to resolve these problems in such a way that we can learn to live our lives in such a way that we support one another and we help others to overcome their suffering. When suffering is no longer personal, we are able to bear it. I mean, I think that is what we're after. I think that, for a long time, we have our personal suffering. It's me, it's my suffering, it's my mind, it's my depression, it's me. It's all that. And when we are able to finally see through that, and we recognize that we do not have to engage in personal suffering. It's a personal suffering that the Buddha is talking about that we can go beyond. But we still see suffering in the world, and we still suffer as long as others are suffering, but it is no longer a personal suffering. It is the nature of what it is to be human. That suffering happens in the world. And so it shifts our attitude about life. It shifts how we are in the world together. It is no longer personal because me and I are not dominant. And I say that, to say that they are not dominant because, to say that, the ego is gone entirely, I don't think that happens. But what does happen is that the ego is no longer a problem. It no longer infects us with the sense of this huge personal issue of me and I and all of my, debilitating tendencies. That just goes away in the sense they may still be there, but they're not a problem because me is not there. So he is talking then about Shakyamuni Buddha and the way of scholarship. And he said that the great teachers, the great scholars, had no power to teach him how to resolve these huge questions that he had. They didn't know, so they could not teach others about how to proceed in their lives. So Siddhartha, he was saying, was not satisfied. In that point, just by being quiet, he found that things, we could call them the environment, have been part of the existence of this body all along, apart from his actions or thoughts. And, he's leading us. You really got to remember that Gien Roshi is writing in such a simple way, but he is leading us in this blueprint. Do not ever forget in this book that this is a blueprint. So when he is saying that he says, the environment has been part of the existence of this body all along, apart from actions or thoughts. So if I don't think anything at all, this body continues. This body lives in its manifestation. And he is going to lead us into the idea that all of the functions, eyes, ears, nose, mouth, body, mind, color, are not me or I. They belong to everybody. They are not owned. They simply are not owned. So I cannot say my eyes or my sight or, my hearing. It just is. It exists. And this is going to be a really important feature, a really important teaching. And he is going to say somewhere when we come up to it that we can't, if we can't get that, we can't proceed. We can't open up. We can't entirely let go of the notion of I. You have to really understand that the functions of what we do naturally are not owned.
So, Edo-san,
Yes.
if I understand correctly, the I that I am feeling in this moment is the same I that you are feeling in this moment.
That's correct.
Okay. There's no difference.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. It's seeing. We're seeing. And seeing is not owned. It's not me. It's just seeing. And we already get this word just. We wrestled with the just word, and yet we can't help saying it. Seeing is seeing. So this cognitive mind, which arises at some point in our childhood, despite the fact that things called the environment have existed as part of this body mind all along. But we use concepts. I'm in the middle of page 65. We use concepts. We started to think my body moves at some point when we were children. This belongs to me. Human society took this view to be a sign of intelligence and has been encouraging it. When Shakyamuni Buddha saw the morning star, he clearly knew that this was a fundamental mistake. A fundamental mistake to see existence in this way.
Edo-san?
Yeah.
What does he mean by the morning star?
So the morning star is the story of Shakyamuni Buddha. He had been wandering for many years and could not reach this answer, and he was trying to get some insight into his own mind. And he sat in a very strong meditative time, and he sat through the night just really with his hair on fire in such a determined way to see the nature of his own mind. And as he sat with such intensity, when he looked up in the morning star was in front of him, and his mind blew open. And he saw, it was his great awakening. So this is the meaning of the morning star. And, like Gandhi's Salt March, we all hope to have our Salt March. We all need our morning star. We all need to have a story of when that drop of water fell and touched a stone, and that was the moment that happened. That's each one's morning star. And the teachers in antiquity all have such a story of raking, and a pebble hits another stone and somebody wakens, or a flower, a leaf that was sitting in a flower in a vase fell off and dropped onto a table, and someone was awakened by that. So there is story after story of these things that suddenly happen, but it also happens because they have placed themselves in the occasion of the potential for that to happen. They have been practicing, they have been deeply focused and moving their mind in that direction. So, so they have placed themselves in the occasion of its happening. Even Pressfield, the writer, talks about being at your desk. If you are a writer, and if you are not at your desk in the morning, trying to attend to your writing, the muse will pass over your house and fly right by, because you're not at your desk doing what the writer does. And every morning, the muse goes out just like Santa with his sleigh on the 25th of December and flies everywhere. The muse comes out, and if you're at your desk, the muse will visit you and will offer you some lovely, lovely sentence that will begin your writing day. So it's the same thing with us. We place ourselves in practice. We place ourselves in the awakened environment, the monastery, the place of practice. This Dharma hall where we are, this Zendo, is the occasion that can promote opening, awakening. So we place ourselves in that environment because the potential is higher that it would occur. But all of the activities of practice are awakening, as Dōgen Zenji reminds us. We come to practice because we are already awakened. And then we come to practice because we need to realize that we are already awakened. So it works like that.
Inoue, someone,
Mm-hmm.
I have a question, something on page 65. What is it? Can you hear me okay? Because I'm having a little problem, a little weak connection.
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it, when these things happen?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can kind of hear you.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Go ahead,
I'm
Joan.
gonna take my video off.
Okay.
Oh, okay, well, I'm gonna take my video off because I have a weak connection.
Okay.
But my question was, where he says, stop managing or dealing with the movement of the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind according to your own conveniences.
Right.
Did you catch that?
I did. So you want some discussion about that? So he
Did you
does
hear that?
Yes, I did hear that. And we're talking about the sixth sense, the sixth.
Okay, so I don't know, what does that mean?
Well, it is just as I was
I
saying.
just didn't understand the part, stop managing or dealing with the movements of, all these sense.
Right. Okay, Joan, I'm going to try and explain it a little bit in the same way that I did a few minutes ago. It is the same sort of thing, that these sense functions are not personal. They don't belong to us each. They simply are the nature of existence. So if we are looking at something and perceiving, then we have already lost, in a sense. He's asking us to see without perceiving, because the eyes simply see. Everything is there. And we don't have to personalize it by what I see. or what I hear. And that I is the manager. So that I am hearing that bus out there making all that rattle, disturbing me, or I am seeing the dirt there and we must go sweep that. That is the I interfering with seeing, hearing, tasting, touch, all of it. Now, I'm not saying that that is easy to live in such a way that the I does not interfere on occasion, but our practice is to practice without the I interfering, without managing the functions, without managing sense functions.
How does that work in the context of artistic creation? It seems like if you're a writer or an artist in some respect, you have to, if you, I don't know what I'm trying to say, it seems like it's almost like you have to own what you're seeing or what you're hearing in order to transform it into an artistic creation.
Well, I think I want to a little bit disagree with you in that, because the more we stand out of the way, the greater potential for the creative mind to act simply without the editor that sits on our shoulder. So stepping out of the way is a pretty important thing in the creative process. Now, ultimately, the editor does come forward, and that's totally appropriate at some point. But in the initial creative act, the greater degree to which we step out of the way and do not let the I, the personal I, come in, we succeed to a greater degree. I think any other artists who are here might speak to that, Allison.
Yeah. It's amazing what comes forward, and without trying to manage it, especially in the early stages of a creative endeavor. And actually, it's sort of a conversation, but the creative process, and it doesn't. I don't know, when I paint, if it's a personal thing and I'm trying to manage it too much, it's a failure. And so if I take it that I have to produce this, and I'm trying to manage everything, or I'm interfering, actually what it is I'm interfering with my own creative process. And and that is important to let. And I really like this, what you pointed out, to entrust yourself to this. This to me is like the crux of the whole thing. To entrust yourself to the 6 sense functions is to completely stop managing or dealing with the movements of the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind according to your own convenience. The functioning is natural. It's already there, it's already happening before you even notice it. When you notice it, the I is created. And but you can let it go. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just this going back and forth. But allowing, I like that word too, allowing the functioning to happen. And so that's what I think is really important. And it's I've learned so much in this book and the last book, Seke Harada Roshi, about not interfering. I mean, it's not that I can do it all the time, but it's actually kind of a relief. This body doesn't need a me to manage it. It's doing just fine. It's not that we don't have to direct our thoughts when we're studying and something like that, but it takes a big load off when you realize the functioning happens naturally. And I was thinking earlier too, when the quote about your hair being on fire and how you're trying to protect yourself, the hand goes up naturally, instantaneously, without thought. That functioning is just natural. And you don't have to think about it. You don't have to think, well, should I or shouldn't I? And so I thought that was a wonderful example of that too.
I have a question about that. I guess the most intriguing or confusing aspect of this, entrusting myself to these sense functions, how do you do that in the context of mind? And that just seems like the trickiest thing, because the process of thinking and thoughts are so appear to be so internalized. And what you were just saying, Allison, about that automatic response to like put the fire out in your hair, but what about what about those automatic habits, those reactions that we have acquired in our lifetimes that are automatic, that are harmful to ourselves and to other people? How does that work in that situation?
That's a very good question. I think our thoughts are part of this process too. Our thoughts are part of the functioning. And I don't know, I think we can direct those thoughts. We can retrain ourselves.
But what is the self that's being retrained? I guess is if there's no. How do we do that if there's no I?
It's habitual reactions. They can be retrained. They can, and we can try to learn more and how to train them. For instance, I'm going to study art with a teacher, and he's a very good teacher, and I really am looking forward to it. I am wanting to be trained. I want further training. So if in order to correct some mistakes, some habitual things that I do in my painting, and I think that's part of the process too. We have critical faculties. We can tell when something isn't right, and I think that's also part of the natural functioning. It's when we get in the way and we call it mine. I think maybe that's the biggest thing. It's about me.
We attach ourselves to those thoughts.
Yeah.
Or the reactions or the the results.
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I think that's a nice place to finish. Thank you for that, Allison. I really encourage everyone to share great wisdom in this venue. But I think that's a good finishing place tonight. And that's great homework for everyone, and to take up those questions that were brought up in your journals. And once again, if you're interested in how to keep a dialogical journal, please, come for 1 hour on Tuesday night, because we'll be talking about this. It is one of the best things that you can do for your own health, mental health, right now during these stressful times. But more than that, it is an incredible way to contend with the literature, to be able to speak directly to Shakyamuni Buddha, or to speak directly to Dōgen Zenji. And it's amazing how he answers you. It's really quite wonderful to experience. So you'll discover how much wisdom is sitting within you if you engage in this practice of the dialogical journaling. So, all right. So we finished then about. We'll take up again at the bottom of 65, because we'll enter again with this question of the sense functions and see how we are with that next week. It's key, as Allison said. This is key. This is the basis for our understanding and awakening. So we'll begin at the bottom of 65, and we'll just once again go to the end of the chapter to 70, page 70. So, because the tone of Gien Roshi is quite different from Harada Roshi, and so we're just adjusting to his voice and his teaching manner and how he is teaching. So it's a little bit of an adjustment, but as you know, Harada Roshi was Gien Roshi's student, so we're in the same ballpark of how they came to their awakening and how they teach that then. So that's where we are with that. So anybody, any announcement of any kind before we leave? Nope. Tomorrow night we have a meeting of the board for 5-year planning for care of the buildings and grounds. And so everybody is welcome to come to that. And it's the same password that you use to get here. If you would like to please join us, you're most welcome. That is at 6:30, I believe.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So, all right. Okay, everyone. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassed. I vow to become his. Thank you very much, everyone. Welcome, Daniel. I hope we see you again.
Thank you.
Back. Okay. Very nice to see you.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Take care.
Yes.
So good to see you all. Good night.
Everybody. Good night. Good night.